Local, the headlines, the issues impacting you and your family. This week in Cincinnati on WCPO 9.
Welcome to This Week in Cincinnati. I'm Craig McKee. Affordable housing is an ongoing issue in the city of Cincinnati, and focus on it was renewed recently with plans for a new development at Liberty and Elm. Community leaders and Over the Ride were upset that it didn't include any affordable housing, and they wanted the project delayed until they could work with the developer on that issue. Council ultimately approved the $77 million project. Supporters said the developer has worked with the city and trying to solve the affordable housing problem on a development by development basis just wasn't a workable plan. Now, Councilmember Jan Michelle Kearney has introduced a motion to require affordable housing be part of future developments. And I spoke with her about that this week, right after she had talked with city attorneys about adjustments that her plan may need. So on This Week in Cincinnati, we want to bring in Councilwoman Jan Michelle Lemon Kearney, who has now introduced, and it's kind of tied to some of the recent headlines, in fact, in City Council and some of the developments, a new affordable housing plan. And we want to emphasize here kind of an idea or plan, because There's still a lot to be worked out here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I just want to say since being on council in March, there are three things that keep coming up. So one is affordable housing. So when development deals happen, by the time they get to council, they've already been worked on for at least a year, if not longer. And then they come to us, and a week or two later, we're voting on them. Meanwhile, around that time, we're getting calls from community members saying, there's no affordable housing included, or there's not enough affordable housing included. And, developers are ready to go. And, we're just hearing about that. So, the other thing that happens is displacement that, for example, Over the Rhine in 2010 was about 72% Black. And then by 4 years later, it was 75% white. So a lot of people, a huge part of the Black working class got displaced. And so when I talk about displacement, someone said, oh, you're talking like, for the Liberty and Vine issue, they said it's an empty parking lot. I don't mean just in that particular site. I mean that, rents go up, taxes go up, and people cannot afford to stay in their home. So displacement is another huge issue, and they're all tied together. And then the third issue is community engagement. And that's kind of what happens when people come to us at the last minute and say, we're not getting what we want, or there's something about this project we don't like. So having said all that, it seems like, developers and community members are often pitted against each other. And yet we all want investment in our neighborhoods. I mean, we want developers. We want them to come in and make our neighborhoods, beautiful and vibrant and bring in businesses and jobs. But somehow there's a disconnect, because we also need affordable housing. The study that listed showed that we're lacking 28,000 affordable housing units. So we have to work it out so that, one, we have development, we also have affordable housing throughout the city, not just in one segregated area. Let's do it throughout the city. And we also have community engagement, and people are not displaced. So legacy residents get to take advantage of all the new amenities coming into their neighborhood.
The big challenge, though, I think, for council itself and for the city, the challenge is, what's that balance when you start looking at the percentages of a project? If it's a 100-unit project, are there 20 affordable housing units in that, or what? Because the banks ultimately, who are loaning typically the money for these developers to be able to invest, they're looking at net operating income out of those 100 units. How much money is actually going to come back over a 10, 15, 30-year period, whatever, that loan looks like. And, that can be a balancing act for the city to figure out and force developers to have that percentage in their plan.
You're right. It's a balancing act, but there are things that sweeten the deal. For example, benefits like tax incentives. Another thing is density. You can say, okay, if you're going to include affordable housing, we can increase density. We can waive some of those density limitations, which makes the project more affordable. Having said that, as I told you, I'm just coming back from talking to our legal department, so that's always kind of eye-opening when they're like, let's talk about this mandatory part of your plan. So, they're not really gung ho about the mandatory part. They're saying it might be better to have, we're still talking about incentives. And so to make it so that to tie benefits to make them incentives, for example. So if you want like a 15-year tax abatement, maybe you'll include this much affordable housing. Or if you want, more density, you include this much affordable housing. So that's kind of where we're going. Ultimately, I want to get something that works. And works means that affordable housing advocates agree on it, developers agree on it. We all talk together so that, okay, this plan works. This is something we can all work with and live with. It is really a win-win for everyone. And so that's really the solution I'm looking for.
I know that in Denver and a few other cities, they've gone with that. And I believe it was mentioned in your release as well, but there's a 60% threshold when you start talking about median income. Is that kind of like, are you looking at other cities and just trying to figure out where we might kind of relate or compare to?
We are, yeah. So my idea really came from Montgomery County, Maryland, and I looked at several other places that had mandatory inclusionary zoning. Montgomery County, Maryland has built up about, I think they said 13,000 affordable housing units. We have 28,000 we're lacking. So it doesn't solve the problem, but it's moving in the right direction. And then, as you said, we have to talk about what does affordable housing mean? The HUD sets the area median income in our area as something like $81,300. So when you talk about 80% of that, you're talking about $65,000. That's not really, that's not so much the population we're really aiming at. We're looking at people who are like at 30 to 60% area median income. So we have to do something to start making housing really affordable, not just affordable for people at higher income levels.
And we have just about a minute here left. Is this only going to focus on developers that are building, say, a 50, 100 unit? Are there going to be levels to this, or is it also going to tie into developers who are going to go in and raise, some houses and build up, say, 5 brand new houses? Is there going to be any type of an incentive for those types of builders?
Well, now that we're moving more towards incentivizing this program, we have to actually look at that. The one in Maryland set the limit at 20 units or more.
Okay.
We might go lower than that. We will have to see. So, it is a work in progress. I'd love to come back once we get farther along. It's going to take some time. But, the other good thing about it is we want affordable housing all over the city. We don't just want it in one area, because our city is still the 5th most segregated city in the country. We need to all live together, work together, play together. And so I think this will go a long way towards helping, desegregate our city as well.
Well, as you continue to work out things and iron out the details, of course, we're going to continue to follow it. And if you have updates, we'd love to hear about them.
I will have updates. Thank you so much.
All right, Cincinnati Councilwoman Jan Michelle Lemon-Kearney, thank you so much for spending time with us on This Week in Cincinnati. And This Week in Cincinnati, we'll be right back.
Welcome back. The InterCommunity Justice and Peace Center focuses on some of the most difficult issues in our community. The past year has made some of those issues more apparent than ever. IJPC's new annual report shows how it's reaching out to people to make this a better place to live, work, and raise a family. This week on Zoom, I spoke with Allison Reynolds-Berry, the executive director of the InterCommunity Justice and Peace Center.
Thanks so much, Allison, for joining us here this morning. An unprecedented day, all dealing with a much snowier day than we expected as we record this on Tuesday. Can you give us just a sense for people who may not be familiar what the InterCommunity Justice and Peace Center does?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. The InterCommunity Justice and Peace Center is an education and advocacy organization here in Cincinnati. We just celebrated 35 years of educating and advocating for peace. And we work on issues of systemic change. So the 3 issues that we're focusing on currently are the death penalty, immigration, and human trafficking. And we focus on all of those issues through a lens of peace and nonviolence. working to advocate for each of those issues for folks that don't know about them, and making them aware of the current situation, and then encouraging folks to take action based on the information that they learn.
While you're trying to make those impacts and change the way that maybe people view the lens they view these issues through, how has sort of the priority, has it shifted, and in what way due to the coronavirus and what we've been dealing now with for almost a year?
That's a great question. I think in a lot of ways, things have stayed the same. We know that the issues that we focus on are impacting the people who are most vulnerable in our communities. And for folks, as an example, on death row, folks that were incarcerated throughout the country were very deeply impacted by COVID. We're some of the first to be hard hit in that widespread format because people are so close in proximity with one another. And so in a way, it really like lifted up the issues that we focus on already in a new light to say, you know, this is something that really needs to be addressed. And here are some of the many ways that folks are continuing to be impacted unfairly because of COVID.
One of the things, of course, that was top of mind for several months in the middle of 2020, on top of the coronavirus pandemic, were the widespread reactions to the killing of George Floyd, the protests that we saw in downtown Cincinnati and beyond. How did that sort of run parallel or intersect with the mission that you guys have at the IJPC?
Yeah. One of the things that we have been working on since 2016, I believe, is an initiative that we call Rethinking Racism. And we've been able to partner with a number of different groups and individuals in the city to address issues of race and racism. And that includes the YWCA of Greater Cincinnati. And through that work, we had created different spaces where people could come together to not only talk through issues of race and racism, but then also find an outlet for folks that are working on the issue locally to take action. And so we joined people in the streets when we could, when it was safe, encouraged folks to take action because, again, those issues of systemic injustice, I think, were just heightened, or people were much more aware of them maybe than they might have been before, to think about how can we, again, as a Cincinnati community in Greater Cincinnati, talk about issues that are national and systemic and huge, but how can we have an impact here locally? And so folks that joined in the protests or asked to defund the police or reallocate funding so that those systemic changes could be taking place at a local level was something that IJPC was certainly part of. And also, I think the work of IJPC inherently from its infancy has been collaborative. So we are not always the people that are at the forefront setting the groundwork. A lot of times our work is necessary to take a step back to say, who are the people who are needing to lead the work? How can we listen to what folks are demanding or asking? So in a lot of ways, paying attention to what folks that are locally engaged in the Black Lives Matter movement or the mass action for Black liberation, how can we take the efforts of people locally and lift them up in ways that we can through our platform.
Yes, sort of bolstering them up for sure on the back end. One of the things I want to make sure that we talk about, I'm looking down at my notes because I want to make sure that we have it, and this is our last question, so relatively quickly. One of the events that you hold that people may be more familiar with is the Way of the Cross for Justice, that procession that's downtown on Good Fridays. Lent beginning this week. So how is this event going to happen this year?
So unfortunately, because of COVID and because of the strain that it has placed on so many individuals and organizations, the Way of the Cross for Justice will not happen in the same way that we did even last year. Last year, we had planned for an in-person event. It was right when COVID hit, and we were able to adapt to a virtual event. So we will have something to offer on Good Friday, likely connected to the death penalty, because I think it's always in the forefront of our minds when we think about the crucifixion of Jesus and the death penalty, someone who was put to death by the state. So we will have an opportunity for people to engage in prayerful reflection on social justice issues, but it won't be in that same format of stations or moments of reflection as we have been able to provide. There are a number of folks. I think one of the neat things about the interconnectivity, given the virtual platforms, is that we're able to share other opportunities from folks around the country. So we will also be sharing other examples of Way of the Crosses that are happening across the country as well.
Wonderful. Allison Reynolds-Berry, thanks so much for joining us here this morning. Stay with us. This Week in Cincinnati will be right back.
Welcome back. The COVID-19 pandemic has put a stop to so much over the last year, from sporting events to concerts and even just everyday activities like going out to eat. But one thing hasn't stopped is construction in downtown Cincinnati. And as our Marielle Carbone explains, those who've been working from home for the last year could be in for some big surprises when they return downtown again.
During a normal year, the orders just keep coming at Ava Blay, because there's so many people downtown.
Foot traffic was good. There were a lot of people. I mean, you have the Kroger building, you have the county building.
Now the sounds outside Len Blaze Deli are different. There are less people on the streets because of COVID, as many of his customers are working from home. Instead, there's a lot more heavy machinery.
It's going to look a lot different. It's going to look nice. I mean, they haven't renovated Court Street. It's been 33 years.
His shop is just a few feet away from this, a construction site that popped up last fall.
Court Street revitalization, we're essentially kind of reimagining this space.
Joe Rita-Miller is the VP of Marketing and Communications with 3CDC, which is developing Court Street Plaza. The project is flipping Court Street into a festival-style street. Car traffic will move to one side, opening up the plaza to pedestrian traffic.
And hopefully this really becomes kind of a downtown destination.
The nearly $6 million project started in the fall, while many people were typing away at their home offices, and will be complete in the spring.
One of the weird kind of things with COVID is that because there are fewer people down here right now, we've actually been able to move a lot more quickly. So people who haven't been downtown for a while are going to come down and see this brand new space that they completely missed.
And Court Street isn't the only place that will look entirely different when people return downtown later this year. Just hop in your car and go for a drive. Take Liberty Street. It's been entirely repaved. The crosswalks are enhanced. There's bump outs and pedestrian refuge islands for safety. Head down Central Parkway, where last year this was just a construction site with a few metal beams, and now it's a massive stadium where FC Cincinnati will play later this year. Keep driving towards the banks. Now, before the pandemic, it was mostly just concrete pillars down here. Now the Icon Music Center is standing tall. And if you get down here, then you'll be standing where the city's first Dora will be, or designated outdoor refreshment area.
This is really the front porch of our city, of our region.
Come spring, parts of Freedom Way will be entirely closed off, creating a permanent plaza for outdoor dining, entertainment, and open containers.
But we are taking advantage of this time where a lot of people are not working downtown right now to dig up roads and really reinvent the fabric of our city.
One of the things I've heard the mayor say over and over again, people are going to come down here and it's going to be a whole new Cincinnati. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Another case in point, Fountain Square,
And with all the glass, I think it's going to really look spectacular.
where 3CDC is flipping the old Macy's building into mixed-use office, restaurant, and retail space.
With all the outdoor dining, I think that it's going to be a new energy and it's going to look like a new downtown urban core.
Back on Court Street, Blay is optimistic
I think they'll be pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I think it's going to look nice.
and says the transformation happening not only outside his shop but around town will be a driving force post-pandemic.
I mean, there's a lot of opportunities down here. If somebody's looking to open a business, this is a nice area.
In downtown Cincinnati, I'm Marielle Carbone, WCPO 9 News.
That is This Week in Cincinnati for this weekend. Please join us for breaking news and sports at 6 and 11 tonight on WCPO 9 News. Plus, We're always updating your headlines, plus closings and delays because of the weather on WCPO.com.